Welcome everybody to the kickoff of the Creativity, Innovation, and Design lecture series. We're thrilled to have you here. There's a lot that's going on campus around the areas of innovation, design thinking, and creativity. And this lecture series has been sponsored by a variety of groups. I want to thank the library who's made these facilities available for us. It's also been sponsored by the Ballard Center for Social Innovation, the Rollins Center for Entrepreneurship and Technology, the User Experience Design Club, the Industrial Design Program, College of Engineering, the Design Club, and I think I got everybody in there. Quite a consortium that sponsors and promotes these things. To get a sense for all that's going on campus around innovation, you simply go to innovation.byu.edu. And I'd like to introduce our speaker today, Chris Mattson, who I've known for a number of years, and we're really lucky to have him here in the BYU community, and thrilled that he's our lead speaker to kick off this lecture series. Let me share with you a bit of his bio, and because I didn't want to take all 50 minutes just on his bio, let me just give you kind of a summary. Chris Mattson is passionate about design. He was born and raised in San Francisco, in the San Francisco Bay Area, to parents who both loved design. His mother was an interior designer, his father a high school woodshop teacher. After serving an LDS mission to the Amazon, he decided to pursue mechanical engineering and earned a PhD from the Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in New York, where he studied early stage engineering design. Dr. Mattson has worked as an engineering intern, a mechanical design engineer, and as the director of engineering for ATL Technology. He also set up a design center in China where he lived for 18 months. In 2006, Dr. Mattson joined the BYU Mechanical Engineering faculty, and currently he teaches senior design, graduate product design, and study abroad global product development. He also team teaches a design innovation course in the Marriott School. Dr. Mattson is an associate editor of the Journal of Mechanical Design and a member of the ASME Design Executive Committee. He was a member of the AIAA Multidisciplinary Design Optimization Committee for 12 years and received the BYU Class of 1949 Endowed Young Faculty Award, a National Science Foundation Career Award, the ASME Ben Sparks Medal for Design Education, and the Presidential Early Career Award for Scientists and Engineers from President Obama. Last year, he was a Fulbright Scholar and spent his sabbatical at the Loughborough Design School in England. So it's a real pleasure to have Matt with us today. I'm looking forward to what he has to share with us, and please give him a warm hand of welcome as he comes to the podium.
So thank you, and Taylor, thanks for asking me to speak at this first Creativity, Innovation, and Design lecture series. I'm actually looking forward to many years of coming to great talks, and I hope that this one can be a good one to start off with. And as Taylor asked me to speak here, I kind of thought, what would be the thing we should start by talking about? And let's go back a slide there. It's really where I want to be. Okay, I guess not. Hold on a second. Okay. I'm thinking to myself, we ought to talk about design. We ought to talk about the power of design. And the power of design is really kind of special because it has this really unique ability to pull us together into collaborations that can result in things that would otherwise never exist. As a community, it can pull us together, but as a community, it can also drive us apart as design tries to put us into kind of like little bins that cause us to look at others and wonder what kind of design they're doing, even question whether it's valuable design or not. Now, I think one of the things I want to start with just to get going here is I think we should recognize the fact that design, though many of us have kind of a technical training or a professional training in the area of design is much more than a technical activity. It's really an emotional activity, and there's a lot of emotion connected to it. And I know this because for the last 2 decades, I've had an emotional kind of wrestling match with design. In fact, I think that of all the words in the English language, it's this word right here that is most troubling. And to me, it's most troubling because it has the power to make me feel tremendously happy at times and discouragingly sad at other times. So, for example, It evokes in me memories of power and success, like the first time I saw a product that I designed on the shelves of a store. This was a marvelous experience for me, one I'll never forget. But design also stirs in me kind of emotions of feeling terribly inadequate to be considered a designer. And I consider myself a designer, by the way. And it's in these moments, which I'll also never forget, that design turns out to be for the elite. And because of my engineering background, not considered one of the elite. Now, this kind of division that design creates, it goes both ways. I've also had engineering friends who dismiss my ability to engineer because of my love for design. And so at these moments, I'm kind of saying to myself, why is it that we can't just work together, put our heads together, and work on the problems that really matter in the world, as opposed to just kind of being divided by design? Why is it this thing that is so common amongst us, design, the thing that brings us all together into this room today, why is it that we want to kind of hoard it for ourselves as if it could be owned by just one discipline? Now, perhaps the greatest kind of problem here is in the word itself, design. It's so broadly interpreted that it can take on many, many different meanings. In fact, we probably all have a different thought in our heads right now about what design actually is. And I think for the last decade, or I say 2 decades, I think is really the case here, I've been chasing that word into every possible corner trying to define it, and unsuccessfully, I'll say. Julie Lasky, who's like the past editor of the International Design magazine, she put it really well. She said, nobody has ever effectively defined what design is. She says, it can be anything, and in fact, it really can be everything. Now, this observation that design can be anything and that it can be everything is both like tremendously beautiful and terribly disturbing at the same time. It's true in the sense, though, that everything around us has been designed. This campus has been designed, this room has been designed, the slope of the floor has been designed, these handles have been designed, the cameras have been designed, the seats have been designed, the doors have been designed, the hinges in the doors have been designed, the metals in the hinges have been designed. Everything around us has been designed, even the things that we think are natural. So this air that we're breathing right now, it's been designed. Now, I don't really mean in a divine way, but I believe that too. It's been designed from a man-made kind of way. The humidity, the temperature, the particulates in the air are all designed. The same thing happens with our water. The same thing happens with our wheat. It's all designed. So considering kind of like this sheer magnitude of stuff that has been designed, it stands to reason that the world's elite could not have possibly designed all of those things by themselves. In fact, I believe that design is not just for the elite, but it's for everyone. And it's an activity that everyone participates at some level in their lives. Now, some of you, I can tell, are not necessarily agreeing with me, and I think this might be particularly true if you've gotten a degree or your formal training in the area of design, where you might associate your designerness with the training that you got. I don't disagree with that at all, and I can understand that point of view. In fact, I just spent a year at the Loughborough Design School in England, where 280 plus students a year receive their elite degrees in product design. And my time at the design school, it was fabulous. And I have no regrets and no disappointments about my time there. But I think we need to contrast this to one of the world's most famous design schools, the Stanford Design School. Now, just a few years ago, I spent some time at the Stanford Design School, and I learned some things that I didn't quite know before. One is that the Stanford Design School doesn't offer degrees. Instead, it's part of the mechanical engineering department, and their aim is to teach design to engineers and to others. And the second interesting thing that I learned about the design school is that at the time that I visited, the president of Stanford, John Hennessy, he wanted every single Stanford graduate to have a D-School experience. And he had already committed unlimited resources to making that happen. So we can see two really different views on design here. On the one hand, we have design as a generality, something that everyone should do, everyone can do. And on the other hand, we have design as a specialty, something you train for, something you become a specialist in. So I hope that by this point you can start to see that design has this kind of tension about it, this tension that can either bind us together with people around us and we can collaborate, or it has this tension that can separate us and cause us to not even want to work with each other. And so my objective with this talk today is to share with you just a few ideas that I think have, at least for me, demystified the concept of design and have allowed me to start to see a designer within myself and designers around me. And I hope that for you and for me, we'll end up looking around and we'll find some people with whom we have a shared interest, with complementary skills, and that we might design something that makes a difference in the world. Or we might design something that makes a lot of money. Or we might design something that's just plain fun to do. That's my objective for today. And I want to do this in 3 parts. And the first part that I want to talk about today is why it matters. Why should we even be talking about whether design divides us or not? Should we even be having the conversation? The second thing I want to do is I want to talk about the spectrum of design. And when we get to this part, I think we'll come to grips with the fact that design can only effectively be described on a spectrum from one extreme sense of generality to another sense of specificness. Okay? And then the third thing that I want to do is I want to talk about competing objectives. Because when we do allow design to let us work together, we will inevitably face competing objectives from different disciplines that try to work together, and we're going to need to find a way to resolve those. And then at the end, I'll provide a few kind of concluding remarks. All right, so on to the first piece here, why it matters. I believe that the first thing we need to recognize about design is that it's an important thread in the fabric of many disciplines. Industrial design, engineering design, architecture, strategy and management, computer science, manufacturing, graphic design, interaction design, instructional design, art, music, medicine. It's an important thread in each of these. And about a year ago, I wanted to figure out to what degree is that true? To what degree is that true? I think it's true, but to what degree really is it true? So I did a simple study based on data that exists here at BYU. And so let me give you a little bit of context to make this even clearer. At BYU, there are 12 colleges, and these 12 colleges offer 542 different types of degrees. Okay, these are degree programs. So, for example, a doctorate in biology is an example of one of those 542 degrees. And a bachelor's degree in creative writing is another one of those. Okay, now for each of these degree programs, the college produces a set of learning outcomes. And those learning outcomes dictate what the student should be able to do by the time they finish their degree program. Now, the good news here is that my experience is only in mechanical engineering, but I can tell you that those learning outcomes are taken seriously. And luckily, they're all published online, so we can look at them. And that's exactly what I did. I went online, I read all 542 of them, and extracted out which ones have programs with design outcomes. And it turns out that just over 36% of the programs offered at BYU have design outcomes. And what this means is that a student graduating from that program will be able to design X, whatever X might be. Now, another way to look at this is that out of the 12 colleges, there are 10 colleges that produce designers in some form or another. Now, to me, this is really important because it means that designers are not just coming from the fine arts or from engineering or from the business school, but they're coming from all over the place. The 2 in blue are the ones that don't have any design outcomes. Okay, not only is design an important thread in the fabric of these academic disciplines, its use in the published literature has also taken off exponentially in the last century. We wanted to figure out just how much that was happening, so we did a little data mining using the Library of Congress database. The Library of Congress is the largest library in the world since 1990. We wrote some computer code and searched for the first occurrences and ongoing frequency of design-related words in titles and abstracts in the Library of Congress. So for example, we looked for intellectual property, industrial design, design for manufacturing, ergonomics, and stuff like that. And this is the kind of stuff that we found. And I think that from this, it's really safe to say that as a society, we're talking more and more about design all the time. We extended the search to Google Scholar and found similar results, similar trends. And to me, this means that we're writing more and more about design and design-related topics. And because this comes from Google Scholar, we can presume that this means we're finding out more and more about design and design-related topics every day. At least we're trying to. So as a society, we have shown that design matters to us. And why do we care so much about it? We care about it because design is actually central to the humanities, it's central to economic development, and it's central to technology development. And not only is it central to who we are today, it's essential to who we will be at the turn of the next century. So the National Academy of Engineering produced a careful assessment of this century's grand challenges. Let me read them to you so you can know what they are. I see design playing a key role in each one of these. Okay, here we go. Make solar energy economical. Provide energy from fusion. Develop carbon sequestration methods. Manage the nitrogen cycle. Provide access to clean water. Restore and improve urban infrastructure. Advance health informatics. Engineer better medicines. Reverse engineer the brain. Prevent nuclear terror. Secure cyberspace. Enhance virtual reality, advance personalized learning, and engineer the tools of scientific discovery. So design is a hot topic, but who cares if it divides us? That's what we want to talk about today. Consider these grand challenges. These grand challenges require us to not be divided by design. They cannot be solved by people working in a monodisciplinary setting. These challenges and the world's non-grand challenges are best solved with insight, skill, and effort that cannot come from just one person or from one discipline. So how exactly does design divide us? Well, design and sports have at least one parallel. And the parallel is this, that athletes and designers, they can both experience performance slumps. And how do I know this? I know because I, as a designer, have had performance slumps. And what happens in a performance slump is not cool, okay? What happens is you lose your confidence. And when you lose your confidence, it's very hard to be creative. And it's also actually very hard to see the value in other people's creations. Kind of becomes that thing where it's like, man, how come you're so good at this? I don't like what you're producing because you're so good at it, and I can't seem to come up with anything. Okay, that's what happens when we get into a slump. And the opposite of synergy happens. This is when design becomes a competition. It becomes me against you, my specialty against your specialty. And because the concept of design is so broad and encompasses so many disciplines, we can easily find ourselves saying things like, the design you're talking about is not the same design I'm talking about. And by the way, I do real design. I'm not quite sure what you're doing. That's the kind of problem that we get with design. It divides us in that kind of way. It places design in a competitive setting. And in that competitive setting, there's a winner, there's a loser, or in the worst case, you have a set of designers who have no disposition to work with each other. The real tragedy, I think, is when a designer questions whether he is doing real design. He's fearing that he's not made it. Because he feels like he's not made it, he's intimidated, and he works by himself. And by working by himself, he effectively disqualifies himself from solving the grand challenges, because they can't be solved by one person alone. And that's the tragedy that design can create in each of us. During my career as a design engineer, I worked on a number of projects with the famed design firm IDEO. And you walk through the doors at IDEO and you get a feeling about design you don't get anywhere else. You walk into a world that values the different specialties that people bring, but the culture at IDEO doesn't allow those specialties to keep the team from doing what they could do if they were united. At IDEO, you don't see the same kind of competition and you don't see the same kinds of performance slumps. Now, there's a person, her name's Elle Luna. She's a former IDEOer. She was asked, what is the most important thing you learned at your time at IDEO? And this is what she said. She said, the most important thing I learned at IDEO was the act of collaboration, teamwork, the wonderful, diverse teams that would come together at IDEO. You'd have an engineer, an architect, a writer, a graphic designer. All of these people coming together to solve a problem. And this is the magic that happens. You get those folks around a table, all looking at the exact same challenge, and everyone sees the answer differently. At first, this causes a lot of strife. And you think, no, how could you think of it like this? I've drawn it like this way. And then what begins to happen is a dance. And this is the magic of iteration. This is the magic of things becoming larger than the sum of its parts. That's when ideas can really take off. The end product is so much greater than just one person's ideas. And to see all those different viewpoints, when you can finally sit around a table and point to something and everyone around the table says, yes, 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 that is the magic. And so to end our first part of the talk today, we have to ask ourselves why it matters that we even talk about design dividing us. And what matters is this. What El Luna is talking about, that's what's at stake. That magic, that is what's at stake if we let design divide us. And it just turns out that those grand challenges need that kind of magic to be solved. Let's go on to our second part now. Okay, up to this point, I've said a lot about design, but I haven't even defined it. And the reason why I haven't defined it is because there are many definitions. And those definitions fit on a spectrum of design, where on one end of the spectrum, we have the most general form of the word, and on the other end of the spectrum, we have very specific definitions. So what I want to do right now is define this pyramid for you, because I've found that for me, when I understand these four parts of the pyramid, it turns out I can use those lenses to not be divided by design. All right, so I want to just say I've made this into a pyramid for a certain reason. I've made it into a pyramid because the most general form has one definition. That's at the very top. At the bottom, there are many, many definitions, and therefore it's wide, okay? All right, so let's start at the very top. This is going to be level 1. And design, in my view, and I've thought about this for a long time. I'm not going to say that means it's right, but I've thought about this for a long time. Design, in its most general sense, is the systematic interplay between synthesis and analysis. Or using slightly different words, the systematic interplay between creation and evaluation. Now, what does this mean? This means that we put things together. It might be colors, it might be fabrics, it might be musical notes, it might be machine elements, it might be metals when we form an alloy. And once we put them together, we evaluate them to see if their combination is what we hoped for. And if it is, we stop. If it's not, we make some changes and we see if we get something more desirable. So no matter what discipline I look at, I cannot rationally break this broad definition of design. The artist does it, the architect does it, the aeronautical engineer does it, the industrial designer does it, the graphic designer does it, the interaction designer does it. They all do it. But they don't just do it for fun. They don't just create and evaluate because they went to some school and it taught them to, create and evaluate. They create and evaluate for a special purpose. They create and evaluate for the purpose of evolving the design to a higher and higher state of desirability, or in some cases to a higher and higher state of detail, or to a higher and higher state of production readiness. So this is the top level definition of design, and I feel like it applies in every setting that I can think of. All right, let me just give you that little piece right there, which is a little bit more. Design is the systematic interplay. I can't actually read it well on here. Systematic interplay between creation and evaluation. Now let's look at the next level down, because at that first level, I see us pretty united. At the second level, we start to see small divisions happen in the design community. Okay, so what's happening at the second level? Here at the second level, design is best described by what it's specifically trying to accomplish. Not just that it seeks generic evolution, but that it seeks a specific kind of evolution through distinct stages of development. So composers, for example, are trying to accomplish something very different than an automotive designer. And an automotive designer is trying to accomplish something yet very different from a cancer drug developer. And the distinct stages through which a musical score will pass are different than the distinct stages through which an automobile will pass or through which a cancer drug will pass. So at level 2, design is the systematic interplay of creation and evaluation for the purpose of advancing a design through distinct stages of development. Now, at this level, we start to see some, parts of the community start to break off into separate little areas. And let us just consider, for example, the imperfect but useful analogy of a tree. Okay, that level 1 definition, that definition through which all products kind of pass, that's right there at the trunk. Okay, but the second level, the one we just described, is where we start to see some small divisions. And let me give you an example of that, and I'll give you the example based on my own career, which is that I've worked in the area of engineered and manufactured products. So all engineered and manufactured products pass through 6 stages of development, and these are the 6 stages of development through which they pass. Opportunity development, concept development, subsystem engineering, system refinement, producibility refinement, and post-release refinement. Now, as the design is passing through these stages, it will pass through each stage and it will have distinct characteristics associated with its design. So, for example, at the end of the concept development stage, the product concept is defined. This means that the basic parts of the product are identified, as well as the spatial, structural, and functional relationships to each other. Once this stage is done, or near the end of this stage, we go on to the next stage, where all of those pieces get engineered, and what results are engineered subsystems. And then this kind of thing happens for each of the stages. Now, because the purpose of design is to evolve the product's design through higher and higher states of desirability, it makes sense that we would want to check periodically to see how well it's going. And this is why models and prototypes are a fundamental part of the design. It's what we use to figure out if the evolution is happening in a desirable way. But those models and prototypes serve no real purpose if we don't also evolve the requirements and the tests that are going to be used to figure out if those models and prototypes are any good. So these are the 6 stages through which all manufactured engineered products pass through. It might be that different words are used, but these are the stages. Now, to really hit this home, let me just say that this bottom part defines what the product is, the top part defines what it needs to do, and this second part down defines how we'll know if it has done it in a good way or a bad way. Now, these stages, as I just mentioned, are the stages through which all products pass. And I think you ought to think to yourself, well, how can that be, right? How do you know this? Well, I've had this unique opportunity, which has been afforded by BYU, which I really love BYU for this. I've been able to visit 100+ companies in different parts of the world to observe their product development practice or to learn specifically about their product development processes. And in every case, whether we're talking about the design of blenders or the design of sausages or satellites or soaps or all these different things that I had gone to see, in every case, designers at these companies are systematically creating and evaluating design alternatives for the purpose of transitioning the product through one or more of these stages of development. So understanding these stages turns out to be really useful for me, and I think useful for anyone working in the area of engineered and manufactured products, because it helps to see how other people in the field fit into the process. So for example, when I'm talking to designers who work in this area, it's really easy for me to see where they are working. So for example, I often see industrial designers heavily focused on the first 2 stages of design, where there's a lot of user interaction definition going on and a lot of conceptualization happening. I also see engineering designers spending a lot of their times in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th stages, because this is where the details of the product are really being worked out. And I see product managers, product design managers working across even a larger stream. Now, this is interesting and important, I think, for us to discuss, because even right now, even right here, we're going to start to see divisions in the community. We're going to start to have this tendency to value those who work in the same area that we work in. We're going to have a hard time seeing that, one discipline who's working in a different area than us has much value. And the problem is we start to think that the thing we're working on is the most valuable. That's really where the danger starts to happen. All right, so before I give the definition for the third level, let's just go back to 1 and 2 for a second to hit it home, okay? Number 1, top level, is design is the systematic interplay between creation and evaluation. And at level 2, we do that for the purpose of achieving specific design outcomes as related to specific design industries. And then at level 3, design is best defined by the activities of design. So while we're advancing the design through those stages, whatever stages it might be, we're going to do activities, design activities, for different products at different times. So, oh yeah, here, I just wanted to point up that piece right there. And actually, I forgot to put up this piece, which I apologize for. So thinking about the way that different design activities are used during the development process, let's just think about this game controller for a second, okay? Designers of this game controller are going to do a mold flow analysis. And mold flow analysis is going to tell them how efficient the injection molding process is. And they're going to do this so that they get products that look beautiful and don't have sink marks or blush marks or any of these other things that happen when you do injection molding. But the people who are working on Hong Kong's next skyscraper are not doing that kind of design activity. Instead, they're doing different design activities. They're doing structural dynamic analysis. This is allowing them to design a structure that can withstand the earthquake. So while we consider design at this level, we start to see a large division amongst us, because at this level is where our specializations start to come to play. This often separates what I do from what the industrial designer does, for example. So renderings, crash tests, cost analysis, kinematic analysis, workplace ergonomics, finite element analysis, these things are the areas where we develop specialties. And because we have those specialties in those areas, the interplay between creation and evaluation starts to become very specific. And it can cause us to look at the person next to us who does not do finite element analysis, and for us to say, hey, dang, you're not doing finite element analysis. You're not doing the design I know about. You must not be doing something good. That's what happens with this process. All right, now the most important thing that I want you to recognize about level 3 is that nothing really great ever happens by a specialist working alone. So think of the product of design, the fruits of design, the top of that tree. It does not exist at level 3. The only way those fruits ever came about is that what happened at level 3 on one root combined with what happened with level 3 on another root and made its way up to the fruit. Think of a car, for example, okay, the best car you can think of. It did not come to pass because of the person who knows how to do crash tests. It did not come to pass because of the person who knows how to do sketching. It came to pass because of the dance between the person who knows how to do the crash testing and between the person who knows how to do the sketching. And that's the kind of collaboration that we're really looking for. And remember that it's during that dance that the magic that El Luna from IDEO describes, where the result becomes so much better than the sum of its parts. All right, on to the last piece. Remember, these are lenses through which, if you can understand them, I think you'll find it very easy to see value in other people's specialties. Okay, so at this fourth level, design is best described by the coordination of outcomes and activities. And maybe the best way to think of this is to imagine and to recognize that designers design by doing activities. For example, like these simple activities that are right here. And the activities we choose, in the order in which we choose to do them, matter a lot in terms of how likely we are to arrive at a good product in a time-efficient and a cost-effective way. Now imagine what happens in a team setting. Okay? It matters even more. Without good coordination, things can spin out of control easily. So at this level, at the fourth level, this is where we see people talking about design process, where we see people talking about do this, and then this, and then this. And actually, there are countless design processes in the published literature. And since we just talked about those 4 levels, and when you think about those 4 levels, it's actually no surprise that there are countless design methodologies and processes in the literature. Why? Because by the time you get to level 4, there are indeed countless specific ways to do design that meet the specific needs of a given product or a given customer or a given team makeup. So now we just got to look at all 4 of these for a second, because it's going to start to tell us about design and why it divides us or why it unites us. Okay? At the top 2 levels, we find significant similarities between your work and my work. But at the lower levels, where activities happen, where coordination happens, where specialties come to play, what's done by a graphic designer is quite different than what's done by a jet engine designer. Now, as far as levels 1 and level 2 go, we often operate here in kind of an unconscious way. And the biggest problem with design is that we operate day by day at levels 3 and 4, where we are separated. So, can you start to see how design can unite us and simultaneously divide us? If we look, for example, here at level 1, we are totally united, right at the root, right at the stem, or whatever you call that, trunk of the tree, okay? But it's at the lower levels where we do different things, and sometimes we do very, very different things. And sometimes that causes us to believe that what we do is the most beneficial, and what other people are doing doesn't really have much value. So in order to keep design from dividing us, we still have to operate at this low level, but we have to recognize the value of the people around us. And I think that as we do that, and as we kind of develop some kind of, collaborative brotherly love, sisterly love with each other, I think we're going to see design not really divide us that much. All right, I want to go on here to the next piece, because when we do finally get to operate in a good way, we're going to find that there are competing objectives, and we have to deal with those competing objectives. So let's explore this graphically. Okay, so let's just imagine for a moment that a product concept can be represented as a point or a dot in this space. Now, for any product design problem, we want to consider more than one dot. We want to consider lots of dots, so that when we pick one, we know we've picked the best out of the set that we have. Now, there are a certain set of product ideas or concepts that are possible, and we like to call these feasible designs. So in this gray space over here, everything within that space is a feasible design, and everything outside that space is an infeasible design. Now, as product designers, we have a certain kind of stewardship to explore this space and to find the best solutions within it. And good exploration seeks to find a product set that is got high quantity, high variety, high novelty, and high quality. Now, we could talk about all those, but we don't have time to talk about all those. I'm going to talk about just one of them for a second, because it will allow me to introduce to you a little success story that I think is worth talking about. And I just want to talk about high quality. So in order for me to take this space and figure out which designs are the best, meaning which ones have the best quality, I've got to take that space and stick it in some kind of coordinate system. And in this case, in this coordinate system, I have objective 1 along the horizontal line and objective 2 along the vertical one. And this mathematical formula that's over here to the side, this is simply telling us that we want to find the values of the design parameters that minimize both objective 1 and objective 2, subject to some constraints. Now, when this is the formula at hand, I will always prefer the blue design over the black design, because the blue design has gotten better in both of my objectives without giving anything up. And likewise, I will always want the orange design over the blue design, because again, I've gained in both objectives without giving anything up. Now, let me just pause to say that these concepts of design exploration and design space, these are my specialties. So when I come to work every day and I start working on design and design process, it's often that I've built on this specialty. Now, I recognize, and I did this on purpose, I've taken you from the broadest sense of design, creation and evaluation, and that systematic interplay, all the way down to the deepest level of trade-off evaluation that happens in decision-making within design. And I did this to try to make real the idea that this spectrum exists. So if we had the time to talk about all the different kinds of specialties that were out there and the details of all those specialties, we would see that there are many, many of them. And I hope that by that you'd be able to see that indeed that spectrum exists, which will allow us to kind of pay attention to people whose specialties are not our own specialties. Let me now give you a small success story as it played out last year at the Loughborough Design School. A few years ago, I was anxious to expand my understanding of design and to work with people outside of my own discipline. So I started talking to people all over the world, and I came across this person at the Loughborough Design School. Her name's Tracy Baumra. She's the dean of the design school and a professor there. It didn't take long for me and Tracy to realize that we had a lot in common. And to kind of put this into perspective to what we just talked about for the pyramid, what happened is that Tracy and I realized that we both valued the top level of this pyramid. We both valued the idea that design is the systematic interplay between creation and evaluation. Now, did Tracy and I say that to each other? No, we didn't say that to each other. It was just a common, natural thing that we kind of built on. And this leads to kind of success point number 1 that I hope maybe you can adopt some of these yourselves. They've worked really well for me. Okay, we saw a disposition to work outside of one's own discipline. I had that disposition. Tracy had that disposition. Tracy knew I was an engineer, and I knew that the design school was not Loughborough University's engineering school. I wanted to work outside. She wanted to work outside. Okay, when I arrived at Loughborough University, Tracy introduced me to Vicki Lofthouse. She's a senior lecturer who also wanted to work with someone outside of her own discipline. And we formed a small team, and we rallied around the idea of sustainable design. Now, I should point out that Tracy's a manufacturing engineer. Her expertise is in sustainable design, which stems from her work in disassembly. Vicki is an industrial designer, and her interest is in modeling the social impacts of products and services. And I'm a mechanical engineer with expertise in numerical optimization techniques. And even now, it doesn't sound like those 3 people are going to produce anything useful together. It sounds like they're just probably too different to even get along or talk to each other. Nevertheless, we got together and we formed a small team, and we did this based on the fact that we were starting at level 1, the shared vision of what design is. And we centered around this idea of sustainable design, and we quickly found that each person on the team had skills that were complementary to each other. Now, in one of our early brainstorming sessions, Tracy mentioned the Berglund Report on sustainability. I knew nothing about the Berglund Report on sustainability, but the Berglund Report says that sustainability is in essence based on economic sustainability, environmental sustainability, and social sustainability. And it emphasizes that in order for a product to exist and be truly sustainable, it has to be good at all of those things. So with someone with an expertise in design space exploration and design space quantification and that sort of thing, it's impossible for me to hear the Berglund Report and not think about this, which is the sustainability space. So remember that blob I showed with the bicycles, okay, the feasible space? This is the same exact kind of space, except based on economic sustainability as one of the axes, environmental sustainability, and social sustainability. So we could pretty quickly see within our team that there would be some value in modeling this mathematically and invoking it and using it for decision-making purposes. Now, because of how this is kind of panning out, you might be saying to yourself, well, you knew that's what you wanted to do before you formed your team. I just want to tell you that's not how it worked. We formed the team because we had a shared interest in level 1 of the pyramid. And with that shared interest, we could talk to each other, and it led to these different kinds of ideas. All right, so this leads to successful point number 3 that I wanted to say. Interesting things happen at the intersection of disciplines. I truly believe that. Let me give you a specific example of how this played out for that team that I just mentioned. And what we wanted to do is we wanted to test our thinking to see if we could actually model the sustainability space of a product. So we chose a simple product and we tried it, and we tried this for the hypodermic needle designed for vaccine delivery. Okay, we started by listing out what we thought the economic issues would be, what the environmental issues would be, what the social issues would be. And the fact is, we spent most of our time thinking about the social issues, largely because there's a lot of things in the literature about economics and environmental sustainability. So what did we do? We then took this kind of generic hypodermic needle design and we parameterized it. And for each of those parameters, we modeled the social issues and the environmental issues and the economic issues that we had identified previously. And then we did this for every one of the parameters. And we took those parameters and those models, and we formed a single objective statement for each of the areas of sustainability. An equation for economic sustainability, environmental sustainability, and social sustainability. And then we used a computational setting to, within just a matter of minutes, less than a minute actually, explore that design space and define that space. And here's what the actual space looks like for that problem. And I'll just zoom in there a little bit. We see the green points represent the optimal trade-off curve, and the red points represent feasible points. And here I'm just going to show you the two-dimensional snapshots of that same space. I think one of the interesting things to recognize here is that this idea of sustainability space did not appear anywhere in the literature. And there wasn't anyone who was talking about this sustainability space as a way to make decisions about sustainability. And it was when we got those three people together of very different backgrounds that we come up with something that doesn't currently exist. Okay, so even here we can start to see some really interesting things. So the design with a square around it, that's the ubiquitous 22 gauge needle. Okay, the one with a circle around it, you can see already some big benefits that would come from characterizing this kind of space. You can see there that it has a much better improvement in environmental sustainability with very little given up on social sustainability. So I've shared this example with you because I think it's an excellent example of what happens when we approach collaborations from the top down instead of the bottom up. And what I mean by that is that we approach this problem from level 1 down, not from level 4 up. I think if we would have approached it from level 4 up, we would have largely seen 3 different people that are just too different to do anything together. I just want to get right here to the end, okay, share a few concluding remarks. We need to go back to where we started, to the spot where I'm saying that the most troubling word in the English language for me is the word design. It divides the elite from the non-elite. Or, at the same time, if you're willing, it opens the door to collaborations that would otherwise never exist without it. And why does design do that, and how does design do that? Let me just summarize that for you. It's because of this spectrum of design. So first of all, levels 3 and 4, they matter a lot. Your specialties matter a lot. That's where the big grand challenges you actually get through all the details with those specialties. But it's levels 1 and 2 that get the conversation going. And how we allow ourselves to communicate and operate within this spectrum will largely determine whether we let design divide us as a community or unite us as a community. Now, just a few tiny tips that have helped me from feeling divided or from trying to create divisions within the community. First, it's important to understand that there's more than one right answer. It's also important to understand that there's more than one objective at play in any design project. It's also important to understand that there's more than one designer. Now, I know it's a little bit cynical, but I'm going to do it anyway to hit it home. Maybe you'll remember this piece, but it's not because I'm a jerk or anything, okay? If you want to be divided, you ought to just believe that there's only one right answer and that you have it. If you want to be divided, you ought to believe that there's only one objective and that it's yours. And if you want to be divided, you ought to assume there's just one designer and that it happens to be you. Okay, now one final comment. I hope that you and I will let the power of design unite us. For good people, this happens. And for those who struggle to make a big contribution, they're letting design divide them. Okay? I hope that neither you nor I will let that happen. I hope that you'll look around at others around you and you'll see specialties that are valuable, that can complement your own specialties. And I hope that you will find people with whom you want to do something, that you'll solve a big problem, or as I said before, that you'll go make a lot of money, or that you'll do something that's just plain fun. And let us remember that when we do that, we get the dance, the magic that's described at IDEO, where what results is so much better than the sum of its parts. All right, thank you.
The Creativity, Innovation, and Design Group at BYU exists to inspire the campus community to be lifelong innovators or designers. And you can see a person like Chris who embodies this and shares that so incredibly. This was absolutely inspiring, educational, very much appreciated. We're going to stick around for a few minutes if you'd like to. We'll have a few moments for questions. If you need to leave, feel free to. But we'll stick around for a few minutes to have questions for Dr. Chris Mattson. Sorry, I called you Matt.
If you have to go, I won't be offended. I know you got stuff to do, but I will stick around and answer any questions that anyone has, okay? All right, so I've been told by the camera guys that the best way for a question to be asked is on that microphone over there, so it will be picked up on the audio recording. So is that a wireless mic? Taylor, you want to grab that thing and just let someone have it?
Sure.
Hello. Okay. Oh, fantastic presentation. Loved it. I just had a question. What brought you to IDEO in the first place? Like, where was your career before that or your life? And then what encouraged you to go to IDEO? And how would you encourage someone like us, the college students, to look for a career at IDEO?
So great question. And let me just say that IDEO, I think, embodies most of the principles that we talked about today. And one of the ways you can see that is in the answer that I'm about to give you, which is that I didn't work for IDEO. I worked as a key partner with IDEO. And IDEO does that. They have like this core team, and then they bring in these other companies. So I had a swipe card access at IDEO. I had a desk at IDEO. They were saying, hey, all the specialties can't possibly exist within our walls. Let's go get those other specialties and bring them in here. And I was lucky enough to work for a company that had a relationship with IDEO. IDEO had a problem that our specialty could fix, and they brought us in. And that's how the first collaboration with IDEO worked. And then when we go in there with IDEO and we act the same way they do, and we say, hey, your specialty is not my specialty, and I want to know more about your specialty, then they say, we're going to give you more jobs because you think like the way we think. And that's how you move forward at a place like IDEO. Okay, great question. Thanks. So any other questions? So while anyone else is coming up for another question, I'll just maybe add a little bit more to the last half of your question, which you said, what should students do to get involved with places like that? I think number one, you have to have skill, okay? So you better make sure that in your discipline, you're becoming great at your discipline. The next thing you do is you got to become appreciative and love to some degree the other disciplines that are out there that are not your own discipline. You need to try to learn a little bit about them. And then, in order to get hired at a place like IDEO, you've got to get yourself a design portfolio, which represents the work that you do. And in most cases, you're going to get a design portfolio that's representative of teamwork. And you're going to want to delineate what you did on the project versus what other people did on the project and how you valued working together with someone. Those, I think, are the tips to get going, I think, there. All right, I see another question from Jeff Allen.
So listening to your bio, you were a successful designer, engineer designer in industry, kind of living the dream, going out and designing all different kinds of projects. What in the world possessed you to go back, get a PhD, and start teaching?
That's a great question. That's a great question, Jeff. Okay, so let me think about that for a second. Okay, so when I graduated from university with my bachelor's degree, I moved straight to the Silicon Valley in California and started working. This is where I had a lot of interaction with IDEO and other places like this. And to my great surprise, I learned that almost everyone I interacted with had a master's degree. And I was like, man, dang, I don't have a master's degree. IDEO at one point said, hey, why don't you think about applying here? And then when I told them I only had a bachelor's degree, they're like, well, wait a second, we only hire people with master's degrees. Okay, and this was really shocking to me. So I started to look around at what I was going to do about that. And so I went back to school to get a master's degree. And my plan was to just get a master's degree. But when I was doing my master's work, I ended up doing my work in the area of modular product design. And I just actually started to develop a huge love for research and a huge love for trying to understand what design is and how people design and how people make decisions about design. And so I decided to do a PhD. And that was great because it gave me more exposure to research. And when I started my PhD, I thought, hey, maybe I'll be a professor. Near the end of my PhD, I was really tired of publishing and all that kind of stuff. And I said, I'm going to go back to industry. And I went back to industry and had a really great time. And my plan was to be in industry for a really long time. But a position became available here at BYU, and I felt inspired to apply to it. And I'm really glad that I did. I don't think that that's a path everyone needs to take, but for me, it was the path that Heavenly Father wanted me to take. Maybe so that I could give this lecture today.
You ready for mine?
Yes, how are you?
So I'm doing well. So what you said struck a chord with me about it's important for people of, I mean, you met someone who had interests beyond just her own discipline, and that struck a chord with you. That struck a chord with me. I imagine it struck a chord with a lot of us. How, for those of us who already have our eyes on other disciplines, what would you recommend we do to, to focus on one while still being aware of the others and wanting to influence the others?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I will just reiterate what you just said, which is really important, actually, that you develop disciplinary expertise. If you don't develop disciplinary expertise, it will be hard to hire you, right? Because you've got to come and bring something that no one else can bring, but you have to love the other disciplines, and you have to kind of know how your discipline interacts with those other disciplines. And I will now try to answer your question with regard to how do you keep an eye out for, or how do you find these other disciplines? I think that the top of the pyramid is the answer to that. So for example, I remember it was about 10 years ago that I finally, after struggling for many years, came to the idea that design is the systematic interplay between creation and evaluation. And once I became aware of that, I started to see designers everywhere. I started to see musicians as designers. I started to see clothing designers as designers. I started to see engineering designers as designers. I started to see designers everywhere. And with that, it simply allows you to start talking to people, because you don't start talking at level 4 in the specialties. You start talking up at the very top. And when you do that, I think you will find that there are people who have shared interests trying to solve similar big problems that you're trying to solve. And it opens the door to figuring out how your specialty is going to complement with my specialty. Anyway, I don't know, that's my thought on that. I think that's particularly important here in this setting, because Taylor's done such a great job leading up this group of creativity innovators and designers, creative people, and we have such a great opportunity here at BYU to interact with people totally outside of our discipline and do things that are creative, that are innovative, and if we approach it from level 1, I think it's gonna work out pretty well. All right, next question.
I just got into the industrial design program barely.
Congratulations, by the way. It's very hard to get
Thank
into
you.
the industrial design program.
I kind of approached it because I had dabbled in so many different things and was interested in everything. So the whole topic of what you're saying is important to me, because I valued the multidisciplinary approach to things. But sometimes I really feel that design slump that you were talking about, that especially that lack of confidence. I've noticed that in my projects, the times when I have felt not confident have been the times where they really have kind of sucked. But the times that they've been good have been when I've felt more confident in my design. And I feel like that's kind of a constant struggle of people who design, is being able to approach their story in a confident way. And during those times when you've had those slumps, how do you retain your confidence?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'll just say that some people struggle with this kind of thing more than others, but I have struggled with this thing my whole design career. I started working 2 decades ago at my first design job. I've struggled with this ever since, but I can say that it gets better and better and better, and you start to rely on history, and you start to say, hey, I did it really well this other time, or hey, it's worked this other time, I think it can work out well. Sometimes when I'm in a slump for a really good reason, which is like I produced a bad product, or I did a bad job. And sometimes that's enough to motivate me to work a little harder because I know the joy of what it's like to be out of that slump. So I will try to answer your question in just maybe a more direct way here. Just let me think for a second. When we recognize that there's more than one right answer, I think our ability to be confident in what we produce goes up. If we think that there's only one right answer and you're trying to get it, it's really easy to be off from the one right answer that you think exists. So keeping in mind that there are multiple right answers and that your one answer, maybe not the best answer, but your one answer leads to yet a better answer and to yet a better answer and to finally the best answer, I think that can help. Okay, good luck. Don't be too discouraged with that. It happens, at least to me, all the time. Okay? All right. Well, thanks, everyone. Really appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thank you once again.